Hello, so today what we're going to do is we're going to work on putting together the PRT motherboard. And the first thing you're going to need, of course, is a kit. Okay, and there's a couple other things you might need. If you're an education institute, there's a good chance that you've got some of these templates that'll make your job a lot easier for you and your students. And you might even have one of these jigs that allow you to break the pins off if it does not already come with pre-broken pins, okay, pre-snapped to the right size. So the last thing you're probably going to want to have are some screws and nuts that we can use to clamp the jig together with the board. So let's sort of sort things out and put things aside and get some parts out here. Take a look at what we got. Okay, so here's the basic kit. In this case, all these pins are already snapped and ready to go. What I would do is I'd probably sort this out. We can get the electronic components. Let's get the header pins over in a pile over here. Keep in mind there are actually some very small single pins that are broke off. Okay, like this. There's a double. Here's another single. Okay, so we get all these header pins nice and organized off to the side. We get these female pins grouped together as well. And I'm going to go ahead and put all the electronic components off over here because we'll be dealing with those last actually. And just in case you didn't get one that's got the pins already broken, let me just show you this jig real quick. So you're going to need a couple of different conformations of pins, and I have them all laser etched right here so you can see that you need a 13 pin yellow and an 11 pin yellow. So what you would do is you would simply take the header pin, insert it into, for example, that set of holes, which is a 13, and firmly snap it. Okay, and now you've got your 13 pin yellow. All right, to do your 11, you'd stick it there, take your fingernail, kind of pinch it and snap it, and now you've got your 11. Okay, on and on down the row until you get all the different pins that you need broken off. You'll have to use something like a flush cutter or a cutter to make the single pin. Okay, but in this case it's already set up, so we are ready to go. So let me set that aside. You're going to need this jig. Okay, and just to explain it, the B is for black, R is for red, and Y is for yellow, and white, WHT. Please note there are a couple little single pins sitting down here. We have a black and a red that sit all by themselves as indicated by this arrow. And there's another 2 pin white down here. So you want to do is you want to get your header pins and insert them into the proper holes. So this is the longest of the yellow. So I'm going to insert it. Be very careful here. We want to put the long end in first. So I'm going to set that like that. Okay, so I got the yellow one in there. I'm going to take this red one. I'm going to put it there. Okay. I'm going to take this longest black one, put it in there. Okay, again, the shortest end is sticking up. And I'll go around and finish off all these other ones. I'm sticking the long end in first here, the whites. I'll put these all in. There's a 3 white. There's a 2 white. I'm going to stick this really difficult little red in there. Okay. And then I'm going to stick this yellow. You might have to rotate that. Be very careful. You want to try to make that as straight as you possibly can. It'll come back to haunt you if it's kiltered off to one side. Okay, so I've got it nice and straight. I'm going to set this lone black one in here. Again, I want to make sure it's nice and straight. I'm going to set the red. And last the black. Okay, oops, and I have one in the white that I didn't set aside. There we go. Okay, so we have all the pins in place. Let me zoom in on that in case you want to take a moment to appreciate that layout. Okay, so you can see it. Pull this out. Then what you want to do is you want to take your motherboard, and you can only do this one way, so orient yourself. You want to have this side facing the pins, the short end of the pins. Notice this 2-hole slot, it has to line up with this. Okay, so what you do is you sit there and you just get this lined up, and I might have to pick this up it's hard to do with it so far away. Okay, and you might have to fiddle with it just a minute until you get all of them lined up. Keep in mind that single pin, that little one down there at the bottom, is probably the one that's giving you the problem. And in fact, that's probably what's giving me, in fact, I can see it's not sticking through. So I'm going to double check, make sure that that's lined up. I'll go back again. Okay. And now you can see that all the pins just barely protrude through. I'm going to rotate it on the side. Notice no tall pins are sticking there. Okay, everything's of the same height. So now what you're going to want to do is you're going to take your hardware here. I think these are 5/8 inch screws, 440s. I'm going to insert it from the wood side. Okay, and I'm going to hand tighten the nut. Please do not crank it down. Do not use any tools. You just want to hold it. Alright, this is just going to make your job a lot easier when it comes time to solder things together. I'm going to go ahead and put all 4 of these on. Again, I'm only putting it on hand tight. Okay, very good. Kind of push things down, make sure things are seated, make sure nothing's sticking up. There's no pins that are unusually long or protruding. Everything should be even, everything should be relatively flush, okay, with a little bit of ridge. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause this video. I'm going to zoom in a little bit first. Okay, see what I mean? Just barely sticking out of there. All right. I'm going to pause this video and solder this side up, and I'll be right back. Okay, so you can see I've got it soldered up. I'll kind of hold it up there so you can see. The joints look pretty good. I've got all the different pins, everything soldered into place. I'm ready for the next step. Okay, so now what you want to do is you want to flip this over, and you want to locate the female header pins. All right. So what we want to do is we want to carefully insert those into the slots. Keep in mind these L's. I'll spin this so maybe it looks a little bit more easy to understand. These L's are where these short little ones go. Maybe I'll even start by putting those in there. They're going to sit in here like this. They should line up. There are 3 of them. Okay. Now this longest one here, it goes here. Please don't force it. Make an examination of the pins before you actually begin. Make sure that nothing is bent or kinked and it's nice and straight and true. If not, you might have to sort of align it because you really don't want to be pushing hard on these pins. And it should fit in here like so. Ever so barely. There we go. And then the same with this one. So I got a little resistance here, so sometimes you just have to wiggle it and work your way into those holes. Don't push it, don't force it. The other thing which I've discovered sometimes is it's useful if it just doesn't seem to want to go, it's just not going all the way in. You can kind of hold it on the side, see maybe if what's not lining up. Okay, just flip it. Spin it 180 degrees and try it in the other direction. Okay. And then do a gentle wiggle back and forth and see if you can wiggle it into place. And this one's causing me more grief than normal. Well, I think I'm going to pause this video and see if I can look at this closer and see why it doesn't appear to be lining up. My guess is I've got a bent pin. And let me pause it and I'll fix it. I'll be right back. Sure enough, the pin in the front was a little bent. So if you have some resistance, they all have to line up. And so what had happened is the pin up at the very front, okay, was slightly bent out, so I couldn't get it to line up perfectly. So make sure you give a good look at it. It's got to be really straight. If you have to gently nudge something left and right, do so now before you put it all together. All right, so I've got them all inserted. Now what I want to do is I want to remove the hardware that holds it together, because I'm going to have this thing laying flat. All right, so I'm going to remove these nuts and bolts. And then you don't want the parts to fall out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take something like this teensy card. I'm going to set it on here to hold the pieces and flip it over. And now I'm actually ready to solder all of these in. So I'm going to pause it right now and solder these in, and I'll be right back. Alright, so I've finished that soldering, so now I can actually remove it from the card that held everything together. And we can take a quick look at the solder joints, and they all look up. Get a little bit focus here. Come on. There we go. They look pretty good. Alright, so now that we've done that, we can actually take and remove the wood plank. Okay, so flip it over. And we are ready to continue on with the rest of the assembly. So the first thing that I like to do after assembling this is to put the resistors in. These can be placed in like so. Bend them a bit, insert them in, kind of work them flat, all right? And then you can splay them out a little bit, like so. And then these can be soldered. So let me pause this and I'll solder these in. Alright, so I've soldered them in. They remain flush. I soldered one wire, checked it, and then soldered the other one. So that way there was no way it could actually kind of fall apart. So the next thing we're going to do is the socket. Alright, notice the little notch in the silk screen? That corresponds to the little notch right here on the chip itself, or the socket itself. This guy goes in here like this. If you want, you can actually put this back on top, and you can use this to kind of hold that socket in place when you solder it in. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to pause it. I'll be right back. Okay, so my socket is nicely soldered, and you can see that there. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take and put in the voltage regulator. This guy, what you want to do is you want to kind of stick it in there like so. Bend it back a bit, raise it up just a little bit. See how I'm kind of wiggling it back, bring it up just a bit so it lines up nice like this. It should lay flush, and if we give it a little twist, I did that while on the camera, there we go. It should line up with that hole. And once again, you can put this back on top to help kind of hold it in place. So I'm going to solder one wire first, check it, and then finish soldering it off. I'll be right back. Okay, so I soldered in just one wire, make sure that it was flush, and then I've soldered in the other two, and this is ready to be trimmed, flush cut, so that we can proceed. Alright, so now we're ready to put on the LEDs. Okay, so you should have two of them in your kit. And LEDs are a little unique. Okay, they do have a polarity. They have a right way and a wrong way to insert them. Okay, so look carefully at it. The most obvious, if it's brand new, is one wire is going to be shorter than the other. All right. The others, if you have a really sharp eye, you'll be able to see that there's a little flat on the plastic rim right here, which lines up with the short wire. Okay. So what you need to do is you need to make sure that this short wire needs to be inserted so that it goes into the square hole. Now, look, there's a little flat on the circle right here on the silk screen. That also lines up with the flat on the LED. We like to put the red one on this side of the board, okay, on the right side, and the green one will go on the other side. Again, keep in mind the short wire and the flat needs to line up with the square hole and the flat on the silk screen. Okay, and you kind of wiggle it in there and insert it. Now we can use this template if we wish to go ahead and hold it in place. That actually works just fine, and it should sort of sit like this. So you do want to be careful though. These holes allow it to actually fall through. We do want to have it flush, right? So you might actually have to kind of work with it a little bit. I'm actually going to solder it as it is like this. Okay, I might splay it ever so slightly. And what I want to do is I want to solder in only one wire, check to make sure that the LED has not fallen out, and then solder the other one in. So let me do that now. I'm going to pause it and put these two LEDs in. Okay, I'm quite glad that I actually soldered only in one wire at a time, because it had actually slipped out after I soldered it, so then I had to sort of reheat it while gently applying pressure to push it back into place. I'll go ahead and trim these wires off now. We're getting down to the last few pieces. I think what I'll do next is the capacitors. Okay, again, these guys have polarity. There's two different capacitors. There's going to be a 22 microfarad. I don't know if I can, yeah, you can see it right there, that 22. Okay, I'll hold it like this so it's in the right orientation. Spin it, there we go. See the 22, okay? And the other one is going to be 100. Okay, I think you can probably barely see the 100. It is labeled, all right? So the 100 microfarad, that would be this one here, needs to go up in this hole. Once again, they have a polarity. The long wire is the positive, the short wire is ground, and there's also this gray stripe. So that gray stripe, that short wire, in this case, needs to go into the round hole. So I'm going to insert it like this. The gray stripe is facing this direction. All right, I'm going to do the same thing with the 22 microfarad. Okay, the gray stripe is facing in this direction. All right, so now I'm ready. You can see the short wires are closer to each other. I am going to splay this out a little bit, and I'm going to solder this into place. So I'll be right back. Okay, once again, I soldered only one wire at a time, checked my component, and make sure that hadn't slipped, and then soldered the other one in. And once again, if it does slip a little bit, you can actually just take and hold the board like so in your hand, put your finger pressing upon the part, and then you just take your soldering iron and heat up the one that has been on, has a dab of solder on it that you freshly applied by pushing gently, and it'll slide right back into place, and then set it as soon as the solder hardens. Okay, we're down to the last couple pieces, the switches. Okay, that does not matter. I like to have them so that the label is facing outward. Kind of makes it aesthetically pleasing. You're probably going to want to have the switches so that they're out, all right, away from each other. It makes it so the board balances nicely. And you can actually use this piece one more time if you want to help kind of hold everything in place. And I think I will in this case. I'm going to sandwich it like this, and I'm going to use this board to help put pressure on these switches. I'm going to solder just one on each switch, check for alignment, and then finish soldering them all. Okay, I'll be right. Okay, so I have finished that, and it looks great. I got some nice solder joints here. Everything looks fantastic. We're down to the very last piece. Okay, this guy here kind of snaps in. It's a little loose. Okay, but what you're going to want to do, as usual, is you're going to want to apply solder on just one. Okay, you can fill it in. There's going to be a lot of solder needs to go in here. Kind of fill up that hole. Make sure the part is aligned, and then go ahead and fill in the rest of the solder. So I'm going to do that, and we're nearly done. Okay, the soldering is done, so we have one last thing to do. Is we've got a couple of these jumpers that we should set into place. Okay, and we'll be able to rearrange these as we get through the curriculum, but a general default is I like to have this one down here on this white jumper. I like to have it set on 5 volts. You can see the 5 in here, so that's going to mean the jumper across the outer 2 pins. Okay, on this one here, I'd like to also set it on 5 volts. Okay, which means we're going to jumper it across these 2 pins closest to the switch. And up here, we're going to use system ground instead of A ground, so you can sort of see it in there. We're going to go ahead and put this jumper across these 2 pins, okay, on the outer edge. And you are essentially done, and your board is ready to go. All right, so I will see you again soon.